All right, it's April 1st, our first Istio community meeting since the KubeCon Europe conference. Before we get to our regular agenda, I just wanted to poll folks for any thoughts, any takeaways from the conference, notable developments.
I didn't go, so I honestly don't have anything this time.
Yeah, same.
Okay. Well, then why don't we turn our attention to the agenda. Is Christian with us?
I don't think he's able to attend today.
Yep. No, he's got a note right here saying that he won't be here April 1st. Metrics merging. Merge metrics, make handling metrics a thing of the mesh. Is anyone familiar enough with this to speak to what outcome Christian is looking for?
Yeah, this has been a ongoing conversation. I've commented on the PR. I think basically looking for a decision on whether we should enhance the metrics merging feature in Istio for sidecars, or if we should instead push people to use native metrics. And so there's some discussion in the linked PR about what we should do. I don't think he's suggesting removing the metrics merging feature, but instead points out that there are some things that don't work well, like multi-container pods, certain encryption pieces, and also when moving over to ambient, it's you don't have that anymore. So I don't necessarily understand. It's not really clear to me why you need it with two separate proxies, but regardless. So that's sort of where the discussion is, trying to decide if we're going to commit to the feature and evolve it, or if we should instead move users towards the native metrics.
Gotcha. Let's see here. Oh, this seems to be unrelated to that, so we can get to that in a minute.
I think it's the hot take one, where it's like hot take on metrics merging or what have you.
Okay. There's a lot of links here.
Yep, this one.
So I'm not super familiar with metric scraping. Why does Istio need to do this merging instead of Prometheus or other hotel scrapers?
It's an old, it goes back before, like metric merging is a feature from back before OTel was even really the standard in a lot of ways. And at least as far as I recall. And the idea is that you want to scrape metrics. So like Prometheus would target a pod and scrape metrics from that single pod. And you'd have a single scrape target per pod. And as a user running sidecars, you want to be able to get the Istio metrics like request total, etc., And you'd also, if you had metrics in your application, you want those to all be surfaced via a single metric scraping endpoint for Prometheus. And so metrics merging is where Istio would basically front a single, like the Istio agent would front a single endpoint and make requests, like for the scraping request, to both the application based on what the user tells us via annotations, as well as the Envoy provided metrics.
I see, and that's totally not possible in Ambient because we don't have a sidecar. So they're
Exactly.
basically locked into using OTel to scrape multiple targets within a single pod, right? Oh,
I mean,
wait,
not
not multiple targets within a single pod because we don't have a sidecar. So they'd be scraping from the Z tunnel to get traffic metrics and then
or the
regular
application and be able to get them to get, yeah. So exactly. There's some work needed there. And so in my mind, this is sort of a decision point around, do we try to still keep the metrics merging experience, or do we push users towards more native ways? Like Prometheus has evolved, OTel is now has some more standards for labeling formats and things like that. If you look at the discussion further down, I recommend at a very early consideration, I'm leaning towards deprecating metrics merging. At the very least, like, is not going to be feasible for Ambient. So I don't think we ever remove it, but I think it's just not going to be something that we're going to be able to carry over for both our data plane modes. And because of that, I'm a little bit hesitant to add more API surface for doing things like describing multiple containers within a pod, or sort of continuing to tack on these use cases when we already have to have alternate options. We're going to have to figure out, users are going to have to figure out something else for Ambient anyway. Can we try to do something in a seamless way?
Okay. Do we have confirmation that like Prometheus and the OTel collector both have their own method for merging these metrics?
That I do not know yet.
Because that would be the key thing. I don't want to deprecate something if there's not a viable replacement.
I would think Prometheus can scrape multiple containers in the pod now. Like I think that's part of the, if I remember correctly in the description, that's somewhere written that pod monitor and things like that have gotten more advanced where you can scrape multiple things.
Yeah. Anyone else have thoughts on this?
Do we know what the like current feature maturity for this is? That it might not even be relevant, I guess.
That is a good point. It's
I don't know what. Go ahead, sorry.
It's a mesh config field.
In my mind, it's GA, to be honest with you. Like it's been around for, goodness, 7 years. Let me see, 2020. 2020, yeah, like 6 or 7 years. Like many mesh config fields, like removing it would be largely disruptive. Like in my mind, it's basically a GA feature.
So one of the difficulties with deprecating it is it's currently on by default. I don't know what it means to deprecate something and then leave it indefinitely on by default.
It's on by default, but I believe it won't actually take effect unless you add a annotation telling, things to annotation, saying what the port you should use for application scraping. So if you don't have Prometheus, oh yeah, so I guess if you don't have Prometheus ports. Okay,
Yeah,
I
so
see.
it looks like this is opt-out.
Yeah, that's problematic because I thought we were using Istio annotations to control it, but we're using Prometheus annotations, and
No,
that
this is an Istio annotation, prometheus.istio.io. You guys
no,
are seeing the docs screen, right? Yeah.
yes. What I'm saying is, I thought that we were using Istio annotations to tell the injector how to rewrite the scrape annotations, but no, we're using the Prometheus namespace annotations and making the switch by default. That is problematic. So we can't deprecate it.
Not easily, no.
Yeah.
Maybe the best thing is to be able to put something on the site, like recommending that this is not a best practice and here's an alternative.
That's the hard part. Like it works well enough for the common like 80% use case.
Right.
And unless you have multi-container pods, or unless you want like encryption or compression networks, thanks to the work that the person submitting this did. But like it's going to be, there's just going to be a consistent stream of work to keep parity at this point.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm not hearing other comments on that. I'll try to write down kind of my thoughts and some of the things I've heard. We have another topic from Christian, and I'll try to share that. This is a namespace config in the CNI agent. You can find the link in our notes. Looks like it's just blocked on TNR.
Sorry, I talked over you there, Mitch.
No, go ahead, go for it, Ian.
I don't think we have Conrad on the call, but I can kind of speak to it. We talked about this, I think, the week before KubeCon. It's had some early reviews, but he's looking for a test and release maintainer, and I think that's sort of the long and short of it, unless we want to review some of it here.
Okay. That's an interesting,
Did I disconnect, or did we just lose Mitch?
I think we lost Mitch.
You just lost me. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. Chrome crashed. Okay, so I guess the immediate ask here for this item is that we find a test and release maintainer to have a look at the pull request and review those changes. The long-term question here is, do we have maybe a pull request health problem? I'm trying to pull up the LFX Insights dashboard, see how things are going for the Istio project. I'll share that as soon as I've got it pulled up here.
I'm not a test and release maintainer, but I had looked at this last week but didn't follow up because of KubeCon, so I can take a look at this again. But I guess even my review does not help unblock him. I did ask for the integration test though, which added that requirement.
Yep, that will be helpful. Thanks, Jackie.
I'm test and release. I'll take a look later today.
Thanks, Keith.
All right, so I'm going to pull up our LFX Insights just to check. Usually when I see like pings for reviews from particular working groups, I get a little concerned about how we're doing project health-wise. Overall, I mean, we're looking pretty green here. Let's see here. There's usually something about pull requests, timelines, commit activities, pull requests. That's just the number of pull requests. Here we go, merge lead time. Okay, so what period are we focused on here? I don't know if you guys are familiar with this tool. This is available for any CNCF project and has a whole bunch of different breakdowns. It looks like we're up to 3 days. 1 year ago, we were at 2 days merge lead time. Honestly, that still feels pretty healthy to me. Obviously, we can always have room for improvement. I would love to see that move down, but I'm not super concerned about that. Obviously, this won't break it down by working group, so we might need to take a look to see if our test and release maintainer is maintainer list is a little thin and needs expanding. But overall, I think this looks, yeah, 4 hours, really healthy.
Yeah, I've got an action item to take to make some formally propose some more changes via PRs to working group stuff. Like for example, Mitch, I think you and Steven, Jen are the only UX maintainers really that are still active in the project. And so there are a couple of things I want to do to try to like help with that and combine some working groups. I presented it a couple weeks ago, but haven't had time to follow through on it. So I think that will help as well. If we can make sure that those lists stay up to date and that we've got a good amount of people in those groups to do reviews.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. I remember seeing that doc come through. I think that'll be a good improvement. Just taking a few notes here. I do note that our next item comes from Liam and also involves a request for a TNR review. Let's go ahead and move to this tab here. We have Lua support. That's exciting.
Yeah, I'm just looking for more eyes. Obviously, Steven's done a couple of rounds of review,
Okay.
but it's now at the stage where it should be mergeable. The API changes are merged in, so
Sweet.
we should
Nice.
be good to go.
I will also add this to my list. I think all of those maintainers, and I've just been waiting for the test to pass, and I missed that, so apologies. But I'll get this on my list and get it reviewed. Great work here.
Obviously, this one's quite a bit past the 3-day timeline, but it's also a really big change, a big improvement, I think, to the project. So
Yeah,
it makes sense that we'll have a lot of scrutiny on this.
Yeah, it's 5,000 lines long, so it's reasonable to take a bit more time.
Sounds good. All right, let's jump back into our notes. All right, hey, the agenda keeps growing as we keep talking. This is great. Stephen just added a pull request. Looks like he's looking for reviews on. Stephen, are you here to talk us through this?
Yeah, I just threw this on since we were talking about PRs that need review. Yeah, this is a very small PR. I actually made it a few weeks ago, so I don't really remember what I was doing with it. But yeah, it's kind of like non-deterministic. If you try to target the same host with 2 different virtual services for waypoints, so this just makes it so that they actually would like merge the way that we would normally do so for like other gateways, which is, yes, technically inconsistent with sidecar behavior, but I think that waypoints are more similar to gateways than sidecars, and so we should match the gateway behavior here. So, the PR actually is pretty sparse, but the issue linked in the PR has got more detail.
Okay, and so how does this compare to behavior today?
Like what the PR will make it so that, like, okay, if I have something like a virtual service targeting app.com, one has a route A, the other has a route B, or like prefix route A, the other one has prefix route B. Right now you get non-deterministic. One of them will work and the other one will always 404. And then afterwards they merge the way that we already, like if you did this same exact set of virtual services on like a normal gateway, like an ingress gateway, it would already work and these things would merge.
Okay, so the fact that it's currently non-deterministic tells us it's a pure bug. This is very unlikely to be behavior anyone is actively relying on in production. So the change is
There's two fixes.
not really a breaking change.
Stick in like choosing one of the virtual services, or there's merging them is the other fix.
So just one clarifying question for me. Is it truly non-deterministic, or are we picking the oldest virtual service first?
As far as I can tell, there's no sorting going on anywhere in the path that picks these.
Okay, interesting. I know there is some stuff with, because I worked on something related to this a couple of years ago, with like wildcarded hosts in virtual service, and generally my understanding is that the algorithm we try to use is to look at the creation time on the config.config, and then and then we pick the oldest one to try to keep consistency. Somewhere in the chain, I don't remember immediately. This is less for waypoints though.
Yeah.
That being this is in the I'm thinking about the sidecar logic. Looking at the code, okay, I see. So this code's all in listener waypoint then. So none of that I'm thinking of is applying.
Yeah. So we could fix that
Okay.
to match the sorting behavior, but I think that this is more correct. And genuinely just more useful. Like I don't think not allowing us to merge these things is something that would be very useful for Waypoint. Waypoints can serve a bunch of different things inside of a namespace, so it would make sense to be able to have.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the bigger question in my head is, does this mean that we're supporting Waypoint virtual service for Waypoint?
We already do. Otherwise, yeah, I wouldn't have found this bug had we not already had partial support. And I'm sure it's like the best effort, but this is part of that best effort.
Yeah, I don't think it changes the support status per se, but just because it's not like GA level support doesn't mean we can't fix a bug in it if we want.
True, I don't disagree. I guess that's sort of my question is like, if we're going to fix bugs for it, should we rethink supporting virtual service or more virtual service? Because it has been a thing as we're talking to people. I don't know if people at KubeCon had any more conversations about this. But things like fault injection and like the gap between the virtual service and HTTP route continue to pop up as like reasons people don't migrate.
This bug will show up if you do this via HTTP route CRs. Like this is, this is post internal translation into what we call virtual service.
Okay. So we should definitely fix that then for 100, even more so. Great call out on that. So, cool. We should definitely change that because that's certainly a bug fix. So we can ignore the rest, that last part of the conversation then. But if people want to reopen that discussion, I guess I cracked the door open. So, but thanks for calling that out. That's a great call out. Liam, you've got a hand?
I was just going to say, when we do eventually migrate, and we here, I mean DocuSign, not Istio project, when we do eventually migrate to the Istio Gate or the Kube Gateway API, not being able to do it gateway resource first and keep the virtual services in place would make it almost impossible for us. So even as like a stepping stone in a migration path, we would still need some level of virtual service support in when we're using the gateway API. Like mainly because it would just turn into a coordination nightmare, and you'd have to do a lot of big bang changes from the way we deploy things.
That makes sense.
So, like Liam, just on that point, right? You guys have obviously probably played with the migration tooling stuff a little bit. I know that like all tooling presents challenges for some people. Could you be specific, like relative to what the tooling does, like what the order of dependencies are and what you guys would have to do? Would be useful feedback, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I can go and play around with it a bit more and get you specific answers there. I do have it on my backlog somewhere to like work out exactly what migrating to the gateway API would mean internally. So I can kind of play around with it then and give the feedback then.
Louis, can you elaborate on what tooling you're referring to?
So the one on ambient mesh.io, the one we shipped that John put a decent amount of effort into. Obviously, it's not a strict Istio project thing, but it's probably the best attempt out there to do that in a codified way. So it's a thing people in the community are using for sure. And if it could be improved, it would be useful to be able to do so, I think, more broadly.
Yeah, I mean, at a high level, the challenges would be we delegate a lot of that to application teams. So although we control like a central templating thing, the actual deployment lifecycle of the virtual service stuff is currently owned by the dev teams. So that's where a lot of the coordination problem would lie in not being able to do a gradual migration.
You, probably me.
I lost Mitch again.
Sorry, I'm back.
I lost myself, maybe. Can anyone hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Louis. I do
Oh.
think like migration is likely to be something that we need to close the gap on. The ambient mesh.io tooling is definitely worth looking into and seeing what that supports and what it doesn't. Most of our users are looking for something that is documented through the Istio project. I heard a lot of folks.
Yeah.
I mean, we hear it every year at the Istio booth. We are interested in ambient mode. We're not sure how to migrate. Obviously, some users have migrated, whether with the ambient mesh.io tooling or just kind of figuring it out on their own.
Right.
But I do think that at this point, ambient's adoption curve isn't being inhibited by the lack of a full support for migration.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair feedback. The nice thing with
There
Liam
is a
is
PR. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Liam is something of an expert, given his history, so he could probably provide a lot of very direct and useful feedback.
Yeah, it's just finding the time to
Well,
actually sit down and work through them is the challenge.
yeah, I appreciate that. Sorry, Keith.
I was going to. There is a PR out on Istio.io right now from Francisco Herrera at Red Hat, talking through the migration stuff, and I know Mikhail and a couple others have added some feedback on that post. So I'm hoping in the next release we should have some Istio project hosted documentation at minimum on how to do a successful migration, and then it just remains to be seen what we want to do as far as potential tooling and things like that.
That sounds good. Well, last I looked before Chrome crashed for the third time this morning, we were at the end of the agenda. Does anyone have the doc open? I don't feel safe opening new tabs anymore.
I just added a new thing. We could not review it if folks don't want and just want to head out early, but
No, go for it, Ian. We got time.
maybe, I don't know, like a year ago, we added an interstitial landing page for the getting started guide. So if you're trying to get started with Istio, the first thing you got to do is make a choice about sidecar versus ambient. Is it time to reconsider that? And just, if you're getting started from scratch, we recommend ambient.
That seems pretty reasonable to me.
I would think so as well. I don't know why. I don't know if there's anybody getting started with Istio that I would tell them to start with Sidecar at this point.
Yeah.
Yep.
Should this go to a steering committee for, because maybe it's a change in like marketing?
I think it's probably a combination of steering and TOC. I suspect we all know how they're going to answer.
Yeah, sure.
Like TOC would make a technical recommendation, like what do we think is the best solution? Steering can decide how to present it. But yeah, Jackie, we can take that up pretty easily.
Yeah, I don't disagree with the decision. I just think just to make sure we coordinate that and anticipate reactions to that change.
Yeah, maybe on that topic, now that multi-cluster is in open source for ambient, what are the dregs remaining of theoretical non-compatibility between sidecar and ambient, and do they matter in any meaningful way at this point?
The big one that we discussed. Oh, sorry, did I cut somebody off?
Oh, go ahead. No.
The big one that comes to mind, and we discussed this a few weeks back, is the perceived decrease in reliability when you switch to ambient. So with sidecars, because they're L7 aware and they have a default retry policy, if a upstream server sends back a 503, your sidecar will retry that. And ambient, if you just have Z tunnels, and even I think in some cases, if you have waypoints, you won't retry that HTTP request. And we've seen several reports of customers, users in Slack and GitHub, reporting increased 503 switching to ambient mode from sidecar. And I know Stephen Jin is going to do some research into the exact scenarios where some of these 503s happen. But that lack of L7 awareness with Z-tunnel, and even when you have a waypoint, if the upstream not in the mesh, I think there are some cases where like there is this beginning. I'm starting to see this perceived decrease in reliability moving to ambient, and that's something I think we'll need to address or like document.
Okay, so this is the lack of passive health checking between Z-tunnel and waypoint because the waypoint basically obfuscates the downstream connection health. Z-tunnel, well, yeah, I'm not sure that that's really a case.
It's not the health between that connection. It's more of when you get a 503 or like a connection reset. Well, specifically when you get 503s at the L7 layer, a sidecar could, from an upstream, the sidecar will retry that, and your application might never see it. Versus if you just have Z tunnels, then your application sees that.
Right, which like that's not going to change, right? That's just an inherent feature of the ambient architecture, right? The other problem, which is maybe waypoint isn't retrying when it should. Yeah, that's a totally reasonable piece of feedback, but one we would probably model as a and/or feature request. Networking subtleties. And yeah, and if we're doing a crappy job in waypoint config that's giving people elevated levels of 503s, then we should obviously address that.
I think there's some interest in being able to set something akin to basic L7 client side rules. So imagine like a multi-cluster, multi-network environment by default with sidecars. All of your load balancing is going to be request-based, including in a sparse environment where not all services exist in all clusters. You move to an ambient model. Typically, you would expect your waypoint to be deployed alongside the service. So clusters that have service foo have its waypoint, and clusters that don't have service foo don't have its waypoint. Those clusters lacking service foo are not going to be able to get request-based semantics across clusters. And that can cause some interesting problems in terms of backend selection. And I think we've called it lasering with regard to which backend is chosen. I don't know exactly how to solve that. I did see that, I think there was a design a couple of months ago for like a east-west egress gateway that might be able to help with those, that basically says, here's our like outbound route for L7 traffic that's in mesh but out of cluster. That might be a potential solution, but overall that is one sharp edge that I've seen in users who are, you know, evaluating ambient multi-cluster.
And that would primarily be multi-cluster, multi-network.
That's right.
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't really thought of how it would work if we eventually support single network. It might apply then too. I don't know.
I mean, in flat network, you see all the endpoints, generally speaking. So each, regardless of where the waypoints are, they would just know the locality of all the endpoints. We're not worried about config distribution state in the ambient model, so we would have no problem delivering all the networking endpoints to any waypoint.
I think that solves half of the problem, but I would need more time to work that out. Obviously, you know, multi-network and single network do create fundamental differences.
They are fundamentally different. Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of approaches there. Like some of the stuff Mike did with overconnect, right? In like small n count backgrounds with small n count waypoints, right? So let's say the lasering problem, right? If you have overconnection, right, at the client side, then you know that can smooth that loadout. Mike kind of demonstrated that in some of his testing, even though I don't think we've productionized anything in that space. So there's a bunch of load balancing approaches to kind of smoothing out some of those problems. But yeah, it's a decent amount of work to take some of those on.
Then again, realistically, I think if we start talking about migration, single cluster migration is probably a good base case to start with. Multi-cluster being substantially more complex.
There's a lot of users out there who are like isolated clusters behind a single ingress, right? And they're not really multi-cluster at all. So aside from load balancing quirks, or however we want to describe it, is there anything else?
I see Envoy filter in the chat. As much as I've wanted the Envoy filter API to die out, as most users in my experience who are breaking glass probably shouldn't be, it's a thing, and I can't remember the statistic. We ran a query recently to understand what percentage of Istio users in the wild had Envoy filters. All I remember was being shocked by the number. It had to be like 60 or 80% or something like that.
It was a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, Liam, like what you're doing with the WASM and Lua filter, the extensibility there is great. We hope that relieves pressure on Envoy filters. I'm hopeful that it'll help specifically for your use case, obviously, since you're driving this as an end user. But even if that solves a lot of use cases, it's going to take a year or 2 years for most upstream users to notice that API exists, migrate towards it.
Yeah, and several of the things Envoy filter enables are not Lua or WASM.
Yeah, I know that Tetrate was working on Envoy filter for waypoints. I've not heard an update from them in some time. I don't know if that's still a priority. I'll reach out. Do we know which engineer was leading that?
It was Zerain. He had a PR, and then basically said he had other priorities pop up and is not able to take it forward. So like the bones are there. He's working with John, got a design doc approved. I think there's a path forward. Just needs somebody to pick it up.
Okay.
The other thing I've got to run here in a second, but the other thing I'll mention is from the AI side, XProc is the other big use of Envoy filter. Like body-based routing is only viable with with Envoy filter today. I was talking to someone at Red Hat who was using Istio for this and like trying to get an Envoy filter, trying to get body-based routing for just some routes, but not other routes, or explicitly, even with Envoy filter, it's a pain. So I do think there's a path forward for that actually. And via Liam's traffic extension API, we could potentially support XProc and then allow targeting routes. But that's a future thing. But I do think that is a path forward.
Doesn't inference extension dynamically route to the endpoint picker, which is effectively using XProc without requiring the user to write an Envoy filter?
Yes, but if you want to do body-based routing, where say the model name is in the JSON payload in the body-based router is another XProc call separate from the endpoint picker that will.
The endpoint picker doesn't get the body?
It gets the body, but you need to know which endpoint picker to route to, which means you need to be able to look at the body to see, oh, we're going to Llama, the Llama model. Then the body-based router takes that model, puts it into a header, and then your route can do header-based routing like normal, send to the Llama model, then it knows to go to the model, to the Llama model's endpoint picker, and that's how it does the routing. So
because the endpoint picker only applies after the inference pool is selected.
Exactly. So that's a big AI gap, because I think Agent Gateway is the only proxy out there that can do native body-based routing using Cell. Envoy can't.
I'll share in the chat. Google did put out a blog post on Envoy saying that it can now do body-based routing. I have not fact-checked anything that was in that blog post, but the blog post exists.
Yes, I saw that. I don't believe it's anything other than XProc.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go look as well, but it seemed marketing heavy.
I'll see if I can find it, and if I can, I guess since we're about at the end, I'll share it in Slack.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone have any other topics or any other things we should be tracking as far as closing the gap between ambient and sidecar mode? Well, that list was not as long as I expected. It gets shorter and shorter. It's been a long run. I think Louis did the first ambient blog. Was that 2021, like September, I think? Or was it 2022?
2022 sounds more likely.
Okay. So we're about 3.5 years after that was the initial announcement. And then of course it took a while even to go alpha and then GA in 24, but it's cool to see that we're still making progress on it.
Yeah, for sure. I think the first I remember hearing about it was Detroit KubeCon.
That sounds like 2022, I think. Yeah. That's right, because we had that like beautiful warm weather in Detroit, which was bizarre in November. All right. Well, thanks everyone for your time. See you next week, same time, same channel.
Thanks.
Thanks. Cheers.